So we move forward to another important topic, news, noise and numbers. Experts speak. To go ahead with this, may I please call upon stage Ruhail, Amin, Senior Editor, BW Businessworld and Exchange for Media Group. He'll be joined by some special names indeed. May I please welcome Deepali, Naair, Digital Sales Leader, IBM on stage, please. I love that smile on your face, ma'am, when you come over here. We'll also be joined by Rahul, Mahajan, Senior Journalist, virtually. And we can begin the session. So, are we ready?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful.
But you put us in a tight situation just before lunch, you know, and we don't want to really, you know.
नहीं sir, excitement on बढ़ा देगा फिर लोगों का भूख भी बढ़ा देगा उसके बाद.
That's all right. So, you know, so Deepali, if you don't follow her on Twitter, please do. She has some exciting stories on Twitter. She does her own podcast. She heads the IBM, the marketing, the digital part of it. India and South Asia. So many hats, and Rahul Ji is there with us from the Prasar Bharati's office. He heads the content at Prasar Bharati. So news has always been blamed and people say it's noise, you know. So on this TV summit, we are not just talking about one genre, we're talking across genres and all the problematic areas that we often talk about, whether it is advertising, and now this session on television, news. You know, Deepali, people in this these times, you know, they have Twitter, they have Insta, Facebook, and then they have news channels. Do you think people actually watch news channels still? Do they go staple? Is that their staple platform to get news? Just want to get the contextual answer from you.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm assuming you guys can hear me, right? So I want to tell you a little story, you know, when I used to be the marketing manager for Saffola and Medica, to put this context in place of what it used to be earlier and what it's now. And typically both Saffola and Medica would be bought by housewives. So we would, of course, you know, be on the general entertainment channels and stuff like that. But interestingly, we would also put our advertising on at least 1 or 2 news channels. Can you think why? For a moment, can you think why? We did not get any housewives on those news channels in those days, but we would put it on the news channels, 1 or 2. That was done so that the retailers believed that we are doing a lot of promotion, you know, for our brand. And the retailers would always have, with the small little televisions, you know, it was the pre-smartphone days. So you couldn't watch news on the smartphones. They would have the little television on throughout the day. And this was so that they believed that we are putting a lot of advertising budget behind the new brand, the new launch, or the new promotion, because they were our major influencers. Now look at the context that has changed today. That little television doesn't exist. I don't know what retailer watches. Some people watch television. I do not watch any television. I cannot figure out the fragmentation of the audience today, you know, as a layman. As a marketeer, of course, people may be able to figure out the fragmentation of, you know, who's watching news. But who can I get through the news channel on television? And why I therefore should be advertising, let's say on a news channel television, you know, that is a difficult one for me, you know, to figure out. As a consumer though, once again, I get my news from online media, Twitter, WhatsApp feeds. The WhatsApp feeds give you the interesting news, you know, first today, and everybody has their relevant news coming from there. I think my mum is the only one who watches Hindi news channels at home. Otherwise, my 18-year-old son doesn't watch it. My husband and friends, most of us are not watching it on television channels. But there is an audience there, you know, and we must understand what is that audience doing there. I think elections is one clear area when, you know, TV watching and what's happening on exit polls and before that and all the propaganda that happens before the elections and after the elections, I think it's become event-led like that. But I think once again, let's think what is missing. I think what is missing is an in-depth news story. Now, whether print does it, whether magazine does it, whether a news channel does it, I think it's an opportunity. Online probably is not going to do it. You know, there is this story that happened 2 years ago, let's say. Nobody has finished that for me. Everybody's just focused just now on this event, let's pick it up, announce the news and get out. But there is an opportunity, I think, for the closure of some of the stuff that happened early. I'm going to stop here, Ruhail.
No, I think news
the
has become
context-
tweet-like in a sense that you get the information, but you don't get the context. There's no follow-up. What happened to that story that you broke? Of course, I think there are many issues in that. Rahul, I want to ask you, when people call news noise, sometimes GEC, they say news is also entertainment. I mean, are these the right labels sometimes or unfair?
Look, हुआ ये कि जब सिर्फ दूरदर्शन पे न्यूज़ थी तो लोगों ने कहना शुरू किया कि ये तो बोरिंग है, ये बहुत ही ब्लैंड वे में न्यूज़ दिखाते हैं। फिर प्राइवेट टेलीविजन चैनल्स आए, उन्होंने भी कोशिश की न्यूज़ को उसी फॉर्म में दिखाने की जिसमें वो दिखाई जानी चाहिए, यानी प्योर फॉर्म आप उसको सो कॉल्ड कह सकते। तो तब आपने रिजेक्ट कर दिया। फिर एक फेज आया जिसमें न्यूज़ की जगह ड्रामा होने लगा। उसके बाद एक फेज आया जब एक पर्टिकुलर जर्नलिस्ट या एक पर्टिकुलर चैनल ने न्यूज़ में नॉइज जो है उसे इंट्रोड्यूस कर दिया, तो आपने उसे देखना शुरू कर दिया। बाकियों को भी ये लगा कि अच्छा, इसको अगर दिखाएंगे, इस तरह से दिखाएंगे तो लोग हमारे पास आएंगे, हमारी व्यूअरशिप बढ़ेगी, उससे हमारा जो ओवरऑल फाइनेंसेस हैं वो ठीक हो जाएंगे। एक्चुअली इसका बहुत ही एक एग्जांपल मैं देता हूँ कि काफी साल पहले आई वाज ट्रैवलिंग विद अ वेरी प्रोमिनेंट लीडर ऑफ द पार्टी। इलेक्शन का समय था, मुझे उनका इंटरव्यू करना था, तो आई वाज ट्रैवलिंग विद हिम ऑन ए एयरक्राफ्ट। तो उन्होंने, जब मैं एयरक्राफ्ट में आया, उनसे बात करने लगा, तो उन्होंने कहा कि मेरा इंटरव्यू क्यों लेना चाहते हो? हमारा चैनल जो है वो तो न्यूज़ दिखाता है, मतलब इस तरह की न्यूज़ दिखाता नहीं, वो सब कुछ नेगेटिव दिखाता है, क्राइम दिखाता है, बाकी सब चीज़ें दिखाता है। तो मैं काफ़ी देर तक उनकी बात सुनता रहा, फिर मैंने उनको एक जवाब दिया, तो शायद वो बड़ा रेलेवेंट है। मैंने उन्हें ये कहा कि देखिए, हो सकता है मेरा चैनल जो है वो 80% नेगेटिव न्यूज़ दिखाता हो। नेगेटिव न्यूज़ में ज़्यादा शोर होता है, सब कुछ होता है, क्यों एक्साइटमेंट होती है उस जो भी कुछ हो रहा हो। लेकिन 20% पॉजिटिव न्यूज़ भी दिखाता है। अगर मुझे नेगेटिव न्यूज़ के कारण लोग देखते हैं और मैं एक फाइनेंशियली एक वायबल चैनल रहता हूँ, तभी मैं पॉजिटिव भी दिखा पाऊंगा, नेगेटिव भी दिखा पाऊंगा। अगर मैं फाइनेंशियली वायबल ही नहीं रहूंगा तो ना नेगेटिव दिखा रहा हूँ ना पॉजिटिव दिखा रहा हूँ। सो जैसे कंज्यूमर हमें देख रहे हैं, या जिस तरह से कंज्यूमर न्यूज़ कंज्यूम कर रहे हैं, न्यूज़ चैनल्स भी उसी तरह से न्यूज़ को दिखा रहे हैं। एक चीज़ और जो मुझे लगती है कि हमारे यहाँ, हमारे देश में जो कल्चर है, वो न्यूज़ को मुफ्त देखने का ज़्यादा है। लोग ज़्यादा फ्री टू एयर न्यूज़ चैनल्स देखते हैं और उसके लिए पे नहीं करना चाहते। जिस दिन लोग अपनी चॉइस से पे करके न्यूज़ चैनल देखेंगे, बहुत कुछ सिनेरियो बदलेगा। वैसे भी न्यूज़ में बहुत सारे एक्सपेरिमेंट्स जो हैं वो हुए हैं पिछले सालों में, और अब आगे भी होते रहेंगे। तो जो फेज, अब नॉइज़ का फेज जो आप कह रहे हैं, ये भी ज़्यादा देर तक नहीं रहेगा। फिर हम एक और नए फेज में आएंगे जिसमें हम एक पर्टिकुलर तरीके से न्यूज़ दिखाने की कोशिश करेंगे। मैं अपने फेलो पैनलिस्ट से बिल्कुल एग्री करता हूँ कि जब भी कोई बड़ी घटना या बड़ी चीज़ जो कि लोगों के लिए रेलेवेंट होगी वो दिखाई जाएगी, लोग न्यूज़ देखने आएंगे। और शायद वो चीज़ अभी के फेज में लैकिंग है, जहाँ पर इन डेप्थ स्टोरीज या मैं जिसे बोलूँ इन्वेस्टिगेटिव स्टोरीज नहीं हो रही।
Can I add something? राहुल, मैं आपसे बिल्कुल अग्री करती हूँ। आई थिंक आपने जो बोला पॉजिटिव, नेगेटिव और न्यूट्रल, उसमें मुझे लगता है कि एक एरिया जो है वो अभी हम मिस कर रहे हैं कम्प्लीटली, और मुझे लगता है कि दैट इज़ अ रिस्पॉन्सिबल एरिया दैट वी मस्ट लुक एट। I think, for example, today a profitable company has to invest 2% of their PAT into CSR, right? Similarly, I feel that whether it is a newspaper or a magazine or a news channel or anything which is related to news, there is an opportunity for them to invest into feature stories, documentaries, in-depth stories. I'm not necessarily calling them investigative, because the word investigative, gets used in the context of kuch hum negative ko bahar leke aayenge, ya, on that. I'm saying positive features, positive documentaries or coverage from end to end of what is happening, I think is a responsibility and an opportunity. The same news channel which is known for doing, let's say, only negative stories and propaganda and fights and debates and whatever is happening, they can always have an hour-long programming, which is in depth. That opportunity is missing, and that unfortunately is, I think, a huge loss for the audience also. I agree with Rahul कि जो चल रहा है लोग वही बेचेंगे. You know, I mean, in a way, media narrative is a reflection of, you know, everything that's happening in our society. If we are showing certain kind of stereotypes, it's because those stereotypes are being liked by the audiences and they are watching that, and that's how, you know, you get the ratings. But I think somewhere we need to have a consciousness and responsibility of ensuring that we lead a more modern, inclusive, you know, equitable, you know, stereotype and narrative, so that we can actually lead that. I think somewhere media has vacated that leadership position and responsibility. I think that's an opportunity.
Right. I think course correction is needed, you know. That's the point that is emerging out of this conversation. But let me also ask you, so news channels have tried, you know, when I talk to journalists, I understand their pain points. They say कि यार ये मैं नहीं हूँ, मैं ऐसा नहीं हूँ real life, मैं कर रहा हूँ, you know, because we have to get ratings, we have to do some kind of stuff. That's not me. They also criticize their own journalism at times. So the course correction is not happening. So as a, you know, as a representative of a big brand, do you think brands can course correct news by not advertising on news that has no value? Do you think advertisers, brands will at some point of time evolve to an extent that they will say, if the news is not in depth, contextual, I am not going there? Or do you think that's a far-fetched thing?
No, I think in very large brands, if you look at the brand safety principle that we all have to follow, okay? In that context, brands even keep their advertising away from be it a social media channel or be it a television channel, where they think that the advertising would get associated in a place which is unsafe from the audience perspective. Now, that I'm seeing, that understanding perhaps does not exist with the smaller, newer brands, you know, where this long-term consciousness doesn't believe. But if you look at any large brand, and, you know, in the good old days, for example, you know, and I'm talking about airline examples in particular, especially because I don't work for an airline, the rules are very clear in terms of, you know, if there is an event of this nature, we will ensure that all our advertising is, you know, shut immediately. You know, it's part of the PR process. But on a regular basis also, big brands always take their agencies, you know, concurrence that my brand will be watched in a very safe space. And the moment somebody comes to know that this is an unsafe place where there is content that my brand should not be associated with, they will stay away from that. So I think brands in that sense are responsible. But yes, this consciousness doesn't exist among us, perhaps among us the startup brands.
Yeah, I mean, and we see a lot of them advertising on television news, TV news. Rahul, your quick thoughts on this. How can this course correction happen? Will it dawn upon the news organizations, or will it take an external force to course correct?
देखिए, जब हम कंपेयर करते हैं न्यूज़ चैनल्स को और जीसी चैनल्स को और उनके एड रेट्स भी अगर हम कंपेयर करते हैं, तो देयर इज नो मैच. हम ना ही कंपनीज उतना पे करना चाहती हैं न्यूज़ चैनल्स को जो कि वो जीसी को पे करती हैं. ये कंपनीज का भी हो सकता है कि वो उनको लगता है कि ज़्यादा जो ऑडियंस है वो जीसी चैनल्स पे है. दूसरी तरफ पता नहीं जो हमें एज जर्नलिस्ट लगता है, मैं थोड़ा सा डाइवर्ट कर रहा हूँ यहाँ पे, मुझे एज जर्नलिस्ट नहीं लगता कि जर्नलिस्ट हैव नॉट रिजन टू द ओकेजन व्हेन इट हैज अपीयर्ड और इट हैज कम. आप पिछले कुछ समय में देखिए, चाहे करगिल हो, चाहे मुंबई अटैक हो, चाहे बालाकोट हो, जर्नलिस्ट हैव डन देयर ड्यूटी एंड दे हैव डिलीवर्ड व्हाट नेशन वांटेड फ्रॉम देम. तो ये अब ब्रांड्स को सोचना है, या फिर ये थोड़ा सा जनता के लिए भी जरूरी है कि वो पे करने के लिए तैयार हों उस न्यूज को देखने के लिए जो सही है और जो किसी एक टिल्ट के साथ नहीं दी जा रही है या एक बैंड के साथ नहीं दी जा रही है और सही तरीके से सही कॉन्टेक्स्ट में लोगों तक पहुंचाई जा रही है. के लिए जरूरी है, क्योंकि किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को चलाने के लिए, खासतौर से एक अच्छे टीवी चैनल या अच्छे न्यूज टीवी चैनल को चलाने के लिए काफी पैसा लगता है, और उस पैसे को अगर कोई कंपनी जनरेट नहीं कर पाती है तो वो धीरे धीरे बंद हो जाएगी। तो इट इज इसेंशियल ये, और मैं ये भी कहना चाहूंगा कि ये अगर कोई सोचता है कि बड़े ब्रांड्स जो हैं, अगर कोई बड़े हाउसेस जो हैं या बड़े इंडस्ट्रियल हाउसेस मीडिया को चलाएंगे तो शायद मीडिया ठीक हो जाएगा, मैं इसके बिल्कुल फेवर में नहीं हूँ, या मैं इसको बिल्कुल नहीं मानता हूँ, क्योंकि फिर न्यूज जो है कुछ पर्टिकुलर जो है इंडस्ट्रियल हाउसेस के हाथ में रह जाएगी। मुझे शुरू से ये लगता है कि जिस दिन इस देश में पब्लिक फंडेड चैनल्स होंगे जिनको जनता फंड कर रही होगी, वो चैनल्स जनता तक सही और सटीक जो खबर है वो दिखा पाए।
I just want to add here, दो चीज़ें, and Ruhail, you may not have asked this question directly, दो चीज़ें जो मेरी observation है, and I used to also look after corporate communications earlier. पहले अगर हमारे किसी CEO या leader पे किसी ने feature करना होता था, तो that journalist or writer, you know, would make a huge effort. 15 दिन, 3 हफ्ते उसकी तैयारी होती थी. That's missing today. You know, whatever be, whether it's a social media channel, whether it's a YouTube channel, whether it's a news channel. In fact, I think कि मेरी podcast इसीलिए successful है. मैंने 2 साल में 36 लोगों का इंटरव्यू किया है, तो आप अंदाज़ा लगा सकते हैं कि 2 से 3 हफ्ते उसकी preparation thinking, you know, में जा रहे हैं. I'm not an investigative journalist. I give them, you know, freedom to edit. It is massively being liked. The numbers are great. I've got awards for my podcast. It's a leadership story. It's meant for a certain target audience. So जो content creators हैं ना, people who look after the content, I think somewhere news also needs to be looked at in that context. I'm not sure. So for example, this whole discipline of content creation that exists in the general entertainment channels, I don't know if the news channels also have that kind of discipline. And not just news channels, I mean saying news as a genre of looking at saying format, short, long, documentary, in-depth, who should do it? You know, you also see that the same journalists who are writing is also doing the video interview, is also doing it for news, and is also doing a feature. That's a difference between a general entertainment channel and anchors and MCs that we have over there versus the news. In news, we imagine that the same person can do everything. The skills required are very, very different. This is my observation personally, you know, as a content creator. I think if we understand the discipline of news also, apart from the fact of the responsibility that we have. So that's one thing I want to cover. The second thing, you know, somewhere I have read and understood that even the public funded, let's say news channel or a newspaper or, you know, whatever it is, whatever is the vehicle that we are talking about, I think there's an interesting model in the US that we must look at, where even the public funded one, the editorial board is something which is very different even over there. Because, you know, the stockholder responsibility is one, but the responsibility from an editorial board perspective also needs to be very different. And we must look at that model, Rahul, because, you know, I think that exists, at least used to exist earlier in the US. I'm not an expert at that, please. I'm not, but it's just something that I was reading about and therefore I wanted to share.
So I have a question, final question, because we have a limited time. But then, you know, we were talking about people don't have that in-depth that we expect from news channels, because we have programs like 2 minute mein 200 khabrein. Imagine, I mean, what context will you put in those kind of, you know, formats? So fake news is also a concern. Not only fake news, agenda-driven news. I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
Okay, so I don't have an answer, but I just want to say this, that I think greater awareness needs to be created over there. And it's not just about the fake news, you know, it is also about the fact that especially when you're looking at the online medium, you know, you're dependent on your feeds. So, for example, I had a very hard time explaining it to my mother that because you're watching X kind of a news on YouTube, you will keep on getting more and more of the same type and you will never hear a different point of view. You know, I may not want to follow American politics and I can choose to never follow and it will never show up in my, you know, feed. But let's say if I belong to Rajasthan and I want to follow Rajasthan politics, I will get that in my feed. Now, that to me is the danger of polarization in the digital world that we live in, you know. So apart from the fake news and the propaganda, so I think television perhaps has become propaganda-led, and fake news is an overall problem in the digital world, that we are dealing with, where we don't know the veracity of it. But Ruhail, I don't have the answers there, but I'm adding a third problem to this, that we are going to become so polarized in the views that we are, listening to. And I have the example of I'm going to a friend's home, and the 11 or 12-year-old child, very well-read child overall, he had a point of view on, this whole Ukraine and Putin thing. And we discovered that he had a very strong point of view because he was watching YouTube, and on YouTube he was watching certain kind of views, and only those views were showing up. He never had seen the contra, point of view. I took the trouble of educating that child to say that you must, watch something else. But I think that's a challenge that we are also going to face in our society.
Absolutely, a lot of problem areas here in this genre. Final question, Rahul. As a public broadcaster, your pressures are very different than a private broadcaster, because you don't have to always worry about the advertising part of it. Is it easier to be on that side and being associated with news compared to the private sector? How do you see it from that side?
देखिए, पहले तो मैं ये थोड़ा सा जो आप पहले डिस्कशन कर रहे थे इस पे जाऊंगा कि ऐसा नहीं है कि न्यूज़ चैनल्स में या न्यूज़पेपर्स में कुछ स्पेशलाइजेशंस नहीं होती थी, और ख़ास तौर से बीट सिस्टम जो न्यूज़ का था या न्यूज़ गैदरिंग का है वो इसीलिए है, और उसमें स्पेशलाइजेशन बाकायदा कुछ काफ़ी सालों के जो है मेहनत के बाद स्पेशलाइजेशंस दी जाती थी, और अभी भी काफ़ी जगह पर ये सिस्टम जो है बाकायदा उसी तरह से है कि स्पेशलाइजेशन की जाती है वेरियस फील्ड्स में, और वही लोग जो है उस तरह की खबरों को आगे बढ़ाते हैं। दूसरा, जहां तक पब्लिक सर्विस ब्रॉडकास्टर का सवाल है, वी हैव अ मैंडेट, हमें एक पर्टिकुलर टास्क जो है वो असाइंड है, और हम उस टास्क को उसी तरह से करते हैं जिस तरह से उसे करना चाहिए, और मेरे हिसाब से बहुत अच्छे से करते हैं। वरना अगर हम जब 26 जनवरी 15 अगस्त ये नेशन को दिखा रहे होते हैं तो शायद हमारे पास इतने व्यूअर्स नहीं होने चाहिए थे जितने होते हैं, बहुत ज्यादा व्यूअर्स उस वक्त आते हैं। और जो टास्क हमें दिया गया उसमें प्रेशर कुछ और नहीं है, बस ये है कि there's a huge number of events or huge number of assignments which have to be covered, और वो सारा जो कवरेज है उसमें बहुत ज़्यादा मैन पावर जो है वो लगती है और बहुत ज़्यादा मेहनत लगती है, जो कि इस पब्लिक ब्रॉडकास्टर को चाहिए। और उस तरह की मैन पावर, या जैसे 26 जनवरी को हम जब करते हैं कवर, या फिर किसी नेशनल गेम्स जैसे इवेंट्स को जब हम कवर करते हैं, तो वहाँ पे 50, 60, 70 कैमराज इस तरह से लगे हुए होते हैं, तो उसको अपने आप में करना इज अ ह्यूज टास्क, उसको संभालना, उसको प्रेजेंटेशन इज अ ह्यूज टास्क व्हिच वी आर able to do, and we are doing it successfully.
Absolutely. I think this is a topic, there's so much to talk about, and we definitely need more such sessions. I'll request the curators that we should have such sessions on conferences. But thank you so much, Deepali and Rahul, for joining us on this conversation.
Thank you for having this excellent discussion.
Fantastic stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. May I please call upon stage Franklin Toscano, CTO and founder IWMBuzz Media Network, for the token of appreciations. And यहाँ पे न्यूज नॉइज नंबर्स हुआ। अभी मैं एक और वर्जन ऑफ न्यूज नॉइज नंबर्स बताता हूँ आपको। न्यूज ये है कि अभी लंच है, नॉइज हमको अपने पेट से आ रहा है, एंड द नंबर ऑफ डिशेस दैट यू सी आउटसाइड, यू विल बी वेरी हैप्पी सीइंग दैट। लेट्स ब्रेक फॉर 35 minutes of lunch, and then we'll come back again with the second half of India TV Summit.